All right, thank you for coming this evening, everybody. My name is Bob Bruner. I am the A&R Extension Educator for Clay and Owen counties. And I am definitely going to admit to you, I am a gigantic weather nerd. So a lot of this evening is me going to be talking about just some of the neat facts about storms and tornadoes and other things, as well as sharing some of the things that I find to be just good common sense to prepare ourselves. It has been a very rainy week here in this part of Indiana. I'm in Terre Haute, Indiana, if you want an idea of where I'm at. And right now my yard's kind of soupy and a lot of areas are seeing some decent flooding right now. There are several farm fields that I passed on my way into work this morning that definitely were holding a lot of water. And I'm kind of wondering if planting won't start a little late this year. We didn't have much cold during the winter, so it stayed wet for quite a while. And I suspect that as the heat goes up, we're going to have a pretty active storm season, though that's just a guess on my part. So why don't we go ahead and dive into some ideas here. So this is a quote that my partner gave me earlier this week, because at one point in this part of Indiana, we did have a fire warning along with a flood warning at the same time. To me, this kind of illustrates the very, very interesting weather we have now in Indiana. There's the old saying, if you don't like the weather in Indiana, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. Well, that's only going to become more true. A lot of the things we're seeing are probably linked to climate change impacts, and they may get more extreme as time goes on. That's why I felt that this program was going to be particularly important, because a lot of us will have learned these things over our lives, but I think it's a good idea to just kind of revisit, learn a few scientific facts, and just remember some common sense things to do. So I kind of said this already, but some of you may not necessarily be native to Indiana, so I wanted to share it a little bit more. Spring in Indiana is usually marked by a lot of moisture with the warming temperatures, and those temperatures are going to be bouncing up and down pretty much constantly. A couple days ago, we were well into 70 degrees. Today, we were just above 40, and we'll see highs and lows that can vary almost 30 or 40 degrees between day and night. That makes for an extremely unstable set of air masses that can mix with each other. Winds can shift very rapidly. A few days ago, I was watching big trash bins get blown around everywhere, and now the winds are pretty much stable and calm. So that kind of gives you an idea that springtime in Indiana can be a pretty exciting place. And this means that our weather can get pretty exciting too. Here's an idea of something that happened this week. This was March 22nd that I wrote this one out. There were several tornadoes that occurred throughout the United States. Blessedly, here in Indiana, we did not experience them. However, people in Texas, Arkansas, Alabama, and a couple other states, unfortunately, did get to experience some of these tornadoes. However, here in Indiana, what we had that day were fairly heavy rains for a good portion of it, at least in my part of the state, and winds that gusted up to 30 miles an hour. I actually have a Kestrel wind meter that I use because I'm a drone pilot and I take a lot of wind measurements, and I decided to check what it was. At ground level, next to a building, the winds were gusting they were moving between 8 and 11 miles an hour, and they were gusting as high as 25. So they were definitely very active that day. And the next image is going to show you a literal radar view at the same moment that I was doing that. That's a very, very large system moving across the entirety of the state there. And that kind of wraps up spring in Indiana very, very nicely right there. Those of you who are interested in this is the Helicopter Emergency Medical Services tool. You can access this through the National Weather Service. And what it is it gives you a very quick snapshot of weather and what it's currently doing in a given area that helicopter pilots who provide emergency services can use to make their flight decisions. This is not a guarantee of an absolute weather look. It may have shifting information, but I like it because it gives me a really good snapshot, and it's really handy during severe weather warnings. So let's talk a little bit here about how to prepare, the whole reason we're here this evening. I like to have a firm belief that if you have lived in Indiana long enough, you know that weather can change really quick, and being prepared is going to be the best thing you can do. So I want to cover this in 3 different ways. First, I want to talk about some of the dangers that might be involved with the weather that we experience every year. Then I want to talk to you a little bit about the messaging that we will get to help us become aware of the hazards in our area. And then I want to move on to talking a little bit about how we can manage our space to give ourselves what we need to be able to get out of dangerous areas quickly and to get our families to safe areas. So first, why don't we cover a little bit of the dangers? This is where I'm going to apologize right now. I'm going to absolutely nerd out right here. So you guys just buckle up and prepare to come with me on it. So first, let's define a thunderstorm. You'd think that we'd have a really good answer to it if you've lived in Indiana long enough, but I like to give absolute definitions to things. So a thunderstorm can be anything that is a rain-bearing cloud that also produces lightning. These can occur in just single moments, or they can occur in lines or clusters, all of which you can see in Indiana. And when it comes to thunderstorms, we very typically think of tornadoes or straight line winds as being the main source of what's going to be a danger to us and our property. But in reality, lightning's actually probably more responsible for the risk to human beings. Every year throughout the United States, lightning has an average of about 300 injuries and 80 deaths. So it's definitely something that is what we're going to watch out for the most part in storms. But we are going to cover a little bit about tornadoes in a moment. I did want to share how lightning forms, though. So lightning is a very, very interesting natural phenomenon. Lightning occurs because the moisture in clouds actually creates static electricity as it moves. So water gets pulled up into an updraft within a thundercloud. And as it moves quickly upwards, when it gets to its higher areas, it's going to become frozen and then drop back down. And as it comes into contact with other moisture, it actually generates static. And that is what is building in a cloud, that static field that eventually becomes lightning. Clouds themselves and the rain is actually generally insulated. So you don't actually get a lightning bolt until the amount of static electricity that builds up begins to exceed the insulating property of the cloud itself. And then you have a great big negative charge that's trying to find the easiest path to be able to discharge itself. Now, lightning happens between clouds constantly. That's not a big deal. We hear it, you can hear the thunder, you see the flashes of light constantly. Those aren't the dangerous ones. We are concerned when lightning is going to become cloud to ground lightning. And what happens with this process is that you have something tall that is emitting a positive charge due to the ionization in the air. And meteorologists refer to this charge as a streamer that rises off of a tall object. Lightning is a negative charge. It's seeking to discharge itself and it's attracted to its opposite. So what happens is lightning is going to strike by first going through this kind of stepladder process where you'll see lots of tiny little bolts come down. And then eventually one of those bolts will have a full lightning bolt. Now, the trouble is that we're human beings. We only see things at roughly 60 frames per second. And in order to see a lightning bolt form, your eyes would have to perceive something at about 6,000 frames per second. However, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has a great graphic that they have, a GIF image that I'm going to try to show you guys. We're going to see if it works, and I hope you can see it. So what you're seeing here, I hope you're seeing it. Someone say in the chat if you can. What you're seeing here is that stepped process that lightning is taking. You're seeing dozens of little tiny bolts begin to stream outwards from the discharge as they try to seek the easiest path to discharge. And then eventually at the end of it, you could see that one path works and boom, it strikes the positively charged streamer and you have cloud to ground lightning. And I absolutely love this image. I love what it kind of displays, something that we just normally wouldn't be able to see. Now, a few more facts about lightning that I think are kind of important. Of course, during a storm, you aren't safe from lightning. It doesn't matter. Lightning can still strike cloud to ground no matter what. Get indoors. Don't be a target. I grew up hearing about heat lightning from all sorts of people and why they have all different kinds of causes. But according to the National Weather Service, heat lightning generally is just lightning from a storm that's too far away to be heard. And probably the atmosphere is clear enough that or it has enough moisture maybe that's allowing the light to bounce and travel further than it normally would. The thing to keep in mind about heat lightning is that if you see it, that means that there is still a storm close enough to you that it could move towards you. So be aware of that. If you see heat lightning, go check your weather reports. See if there's anything on its way. This one I actually had to look up on my own, and I was amazed that people believe this, but I wanted to share it with all of you. If you see someone get hit, render aid as soon as possible. Their body isn't going to bear some kind of residual charge that could harm you. They are safe to come to contact with and they need your help. So if you see someone get hit, go ahead and help them out. Don't worry, there is no risk to you. It's going to be better that you get yourself and that person indoors to avoid any more incidences of lightning. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about tornadoes now, and this one's kind of near and dear to me. I was born in the town of Monticello, Indiana, and I was born in 1981, so I was not around for this incident, but it stayed in the town's memory for a very, very long time. In 1974, the town of Monticello was virtually destroyed by a tornado. And I don't know, some of you might mention it in the chats. Those of you who were adults or who could remember this, in 1974, there was a major super outbreak of tornadoes across the United States. And unfortunately, Indiana was subject to one of them. Here, what you're looking at is what remains of the courthouse built in 1890 that got hit. While the outside looks intact, it is definitely not. They are not showing you the right angle to see how badly the damage is. This courthouse did not last much longer because it was demolished. It was unsafe due to the damage by the tornado. What you're looking at here is same town, Monticello. This is Jefferson Street. This is 2 streets away from the first house I ever lived in. So that is a lot of damage there. And thankfully I was not around to see it. So what this was a part of, I mentioned it, was a super outbreak of tornadoes. I see parties saying the Palm Sunday tornadoes. I don't know, party, if that was another name for them. It might be. I don't recall if it was on a Sunday or not. What did happen, though, what I do know is what you see on your slide here. This was just one of 148 tornadoes that struck in 1974 and that covered 13 states. And all of this happened within only a couple of days. So this was an absolutely massive weather event. Now, the tornado that hit Monticello formed between Lafayette, Indiana and Brookston, Indiana. And Brookston is just about 15 minutes north of Lafayette. And this tornado traveled 121 miles directly through Monticello on its way to Fort Wayne. And unfortunately, there was just a whole lot of damage done. This was not the most lethal this is not the most lethal tornado that happened during the super outbreak. Unfortunately, I think a town in Ohio actually took the brunt of that. But this was the longest damage path. I mean, if you think about it, 120 miles, that is just absolutely massive. I can't even conceive of that. So it brings up an interesting question: how do tornadoes form? And this is something that's just still not fully clear. We got a better idea of how it does so, but it's not completely clear yet. What we do understand is that tornadoes generally form from high wind shear, where you have lots of cool air mixing with lots of warm air. And when they're up closer to the ground, the formation begins kind of laid horizontally, where the air begins spinning over and over. And then what happens is that spinning air begins to connect with different types of clouds that are connected to the underneath of the storm, like an anvil cloud, you may hear it referred to as. And eventually that updraft takes it up and then the tornado looks like it's snaking down from the cloud itself. We rate tornadoes in different ways. You have probably heard of tornadoes being called F1, F2. Nowadays, what they do is they put EF in front of it because they have a different understanding of the damage tornadoes do. It's the enhanced Fujita scale, originally just the Fujita scale. But now they have these ratings that we can look at. So you could see here, for example, an EF0 is something that has a 3-second gust of about 65 to 85 miles an hour. And it's also the least damaging. And this goes all the way to the EF5, which has a 3-second gust of over 200 miles an hour. Imagine that, sustained 3 seconds of 200 miles an hour wind. Not much is going to be standing after that. And I had a friend once who worked as a meteorologist who used to joke somewhat that a tornado that strong is basically tearing up the soil to bedrock. I heard from someone else once during a strong tornado, I think they experienced an EF3, they said it was pulling potatoes out of their garden. And you can see all kinds of very, very strange events with these high wind speeds. The tail of a straw being driven through a tree is not so much a tail, it's something that can happen. And some of you may have seen recently from the weather events a few days ago, you can find online a picture of a truck being caught by a tornado that got spun around on its side. And blessedly, the guy who was in the truck, it was eventually righted by the same tornado, and he was able to drive away. So needless to say, these are weather events that you don't want to be close to. All right, I have talked a lot about the neat stuff of just how interesting these weather events are. Let's talk a little bit about what we can listen for, how we can understand the messaging that we get from organizations like the National Weather Service. So the first thing that I want all of you to do, this is super easy. You can even do it right now. Get a weather radio or an app on your phone. I have a weather app on my phone from the National Weather Service. I like that one because it gives me information from that is intended for pilots. So I looked at that information being a pilot myself, and I find it very reliable. And there are lots of good weather apps out there. However, you need to assume that cellular networks might not work if there's a very, very strong storm occurring, or if like local cell towers have been downed or hit by lightning. Weather radios are built to be able to go through that. You'll find them available online, lots of different places. Consider getting one. It's my intention. I want to get one for the offices that I work in because there are a lot of storms in the area that I live in. So let's look at a little bit at the difference between a watch and a warning. So we hear this all the time. There's a severe thunderstorm watch. There is a severe thunderstorm warning. What do these actually mean? So a watch means that the conditions are right for a thunderstorm to occur, and it's very likely, and we need to be alert for an approaching storm. Now, something to keep in mind is that let's say you see there's a thunderstorm watch. So you're smart, you go online or you check your phone or whatever, and you get a radar picture, and you don't see any rain on the radar whatsoever. Well, the thing is, the watch means the conditions are right. It could quite literally form over your head. So we need to keep our eyes open when a watch is issued, because even though it's not raining now, it very well could be very soon. Now, what a thunderstorm warning is totally different. This means that, yes, there is a thunderstorm, it has formed, and it is on its way to you. Often these warnings are accompanied by the information on the path of a storm. And by the point that the thunderstorm warning is released, that means it is on its way. It is no longer a guess, it is a guarantee that you're going to get it. That is when you really want to pay attention to your radar. And a warning is issued when there is imminent danger to life and property of those in the path of the storm. So this is not something we want to mess around with. Now, keep in mind, I know that I am talking to a group of people who most likely grew up in Indiana. And for us, a thunderstorm watch is, oh, let's have drinks outside. A thunderstorm warning is, oh, maybe we should go inside and have our drinks there for a moment. We will go outside to look at things first. And we are particularly bad at it when it comes to understanding the warnings around a tornado. I have been that idiot who will see there is a tornado watch and I'll poke my head outside because I want to see it. I used to do some amateur storm chasing when I was in college, and I can tell you firsthand, these are not things you want to mess around with. They will put the fear of God in you. They are a different kind of threat compared to our thunderstorms. Our thunderstorms are broad area things with lots of water, straight line winds, and lightning. Tornadoes, however, are limited to a specific area, and unfortunately, their paths are very unpredictable. There is no way to predict the size and power of a tornado. We can only do educated guesswork. So you have to treat every single tornado as though it is a big one. Now, again, the watch just means that the conditions are right for a tornado to form. It doesn't mean that one will. A tornado warning means that there is one on the ground right now and you are potentially in its path. Do not waste your time. Get to a shelter immediately. Folks, I've known plenty of families growing up and as a professional who've lost their homes to a tornado. It's not something you want to mess around with. Now let's go over a little bit about preparing our space for this. Keep in mind, whether it's a thunderstorm or whether it's a tornado, if we prepare our space well, we can actually remove a lot of hazards from our homes and our areas. This is just the simple stuff. To me, this is the common sense stuff. Go outside and take a look around. We know that any storm is probably going to generate strong wind and lightning. So can anything be moved? Removing any dead trees or downed limbs to eliminate them as a fire risk or something that could attract lightning is a good idea. And it's going to take away anything that could become a potential missile that could be driven through your home or other pieces of your property. Do you have like patio furniture, toys, outdoor equipment? This stuff can get picked up. It could get thrown around. It could damage you or your property. So it's just going to be easy. If you're on a day where you know that the conditions are right for a storm, just go put stuff away. Pick up the truck that the kids were playing with or whatever, put it away so that way you can reduce your risk. So what about the house itself? This is the harder one because this is all of those little tasks that we keep meaning to complete. Now's a good time to work on them. Do you have any repairs to do, like on your shutters? Do you have that one window that's just not quite working right? Or have your windows already been damaged at one point and need some replacing, like the screens or something like that? Go ahead and do it. Now's a great time of year to do it. I think this weekend's going to be fairly dry and the temperature should be decent. Go ahead and make those changes that you keep planning for. Now, one thing to do with your inside space when a thunderstorm occurs is to go ahead and unplug all of your electronics, even if they are on a surge protector. Surge protectors do a great job when there is a power surge through your network into your home, but there is no piece of equipment in all of creation that is going to protect your electronics from a direct lightning strike to your home. It will melt right through that and go through the next thing. So just go ahead and unplug those things. That way you can save yourself a lot of money and reduce your potential fire risk. And another thing, our moms were right. Don't take a bath or a shower during a thunderstorm. Electricity can conduct through the pipes and through the water in the pipes, so don't be around them if there's like a big lightning risk during that storm. Now, I want to talk about locating shelter as well. This is critically important as we begin to move further into the year, especially as we begin to see climate change create more dangerous and more frequent storms. Tornado shelters and storm shelters are just going to have to become a part of what we do a little bit more. And I know a lot of us, we already have them in many of our businesses, our schools, and you may even have some older ones on the property you live on. Updating those and taking care of them is a great plan. So whenever there is a severe weather event, you need to be thinking whether or not you need to go to shelter. Even if there is not a tornado present, there have been a few storms that I have seen in the last couple of years even, where the winds and the lightning were dangerous enough that I was thinking I need to get my family down to my basement. Shelter should always be sturdy, preferably below ground and away from any kinds of windows. I actually had this conversation the other day with my partner. When a storm occurs, what are we going to do and where's going to be the safest place in our basement? And we logicked it out that probably directly underneath the stairs is going to be safest because it's the furthest away from any of the windows that the basement does have. Any shelter that you go into should have at least a minimal amount of equipment with emergency supplies, like a weather radio, water, food, and blankets, just in case. Always be a little bit safer than you need to be here. You'd rather have something and not need it. And shelter is not going to do you any favors unless you make a plan for emergency weather and talk it out with your family. Make sure everybody knows what to do, even if it's as simple as grab the dog and go downstairs. That works. Make sure you account for anything important, like any important papers that you may need for legal reasons. And then please don't forget your companion animals. They are a part of our families. Take them with you, take care of them. They will make sure that you are safe too. And of course, in your basement, especially in this day and age, make sure you have batteries or chargers that you can use. There are plenty of chargers that you can get that can charge via sunlight. My partner uses those quite a bit. So take those with you. That way you can make sure you have ready access to information. That's going to be important, especially during the more severe weather events. And they do add on there, as you can see, you may have to assume that cell networks might be difficult to connect to because if the storm damage was bad enough, or if the air has a lot of lightning occurring, EMF interference is going to be very high, so things might not connect as easily. Though I've noticed that our systems seem to be fairly stable even during some of the worst ones. So hopefully that will be a non-issue in the future. Okay, just the last bit that I was going to add on here, a little bit about being in vehicles. Uh, the rubber on tires or on your shoes does not insulate you against lightning. A lightning strike will just go right through that. The lightning strikes in your vehicles, however, will conduct through the metal frames of your vehicles and hopefully discharge through the ground. But you need to expect that it's going to pry through all of the electrical components and probably blow out at least one of the tires as it passes through the steel belt and into the ground. Fire is going to be your greatest risk there. So it's a bit of a difficult thing to decide whether to stay in your vehicle or not. It's best to find some other kind of shelter. If you are driving in a storm, visibility is always a concern. Make sure you have lights on that your fellow drivers can see you. But also, this is where I want to say practice some good common sense. If you are barely able to see and you're trying to get home, man, just pull over. Let it go by. Don't take that risk. We will miss you if you are gone. So just be careful. I've had to pull over a couple of times. I've lived in Texas and Mississippi and Iowa, all of which have some very severe storms. And I had to learn that lesson of pulling over is the better idea. So just take my advice and pull over. And again, seek shelter. Even if there isn't a tornado, wind and rain and lightning still create a lot of risks, and we would rather see you be safe. So I wanted to add this about tornadoes too, because there's a few myths about vehicles and tornadoes. The first one is the most obvious one. When there is a tornado, there is no safe option. If you're on the road, there are just options that might be slightly less risky. If the tornado is distant from you, try to drive at right angles to it to move away from the tornado. But unfortunately, we have to keep in mind tornadoes are unpredictable and they can shift their paths very, very quickly. So you need to be very aware if you are driving in those kinds of conditions. If you do see that a tornado is just simply too close to get away from, pull over. And this is taken directly from the National Weather Service. You've got two options. One of them is staying in your vehicle, covering your head and staying below the line of the windows. This is based on the assumption that there isn't a low area you can get to first. Ideally, get below the line of the roadway and get out of your vehicle, because obviously we've seen plenty of instances where a tornado can pick one up. That way you can stay below the line of the winds and hopefully any other debris that's flying around. Do not park under an overpass or a bridge. That actually creates a really bad area where missiles made of debris can go through. High winds can create different kinds of suction sometimes, and you don't want to be there when that happens. So don't do that. That is a myth. Don't park under there. You're better off just getting to a low area and staying below the line of the winds and avoid any debris. All right, so we've covered this evening, knowing our dangers, we saw some of the signs of storms and to listen for radios through apps or listen for warnings through radios and apps. Understand our messaging. So I talked a little bit about what the difference between watches and warnings, and I'm more than happy to talk even further about it if you guys want to message me or talk to me about it. And of course, we want to prepare our space. Remove anything that's going to create a hazard. Don't let things become missiles, and make sure that you have shelter prepared and your family knows how to get to it. All right, with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and stop for the evening. I've got my contact information up in front of you right now for both of my offices and how to reach me by email, as well as links to our Purdue Ed store that has plenty of publications about this and other topics, as well as a link to our Purdue Pest and Plant Diagnostic Lab. I always like to share this one in case people have issues with insects or plants that just need a scientist to take a look and help you figure out what the problem is.